What's up, y'all? Happy New Year, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Balance. We made it into 2019, and I want to thank you all for listening all throughout 2018 when I started the podcast back in March. And I also want to thank you for all of the likes, the retweets, the leaving reviews, and rating the podcast on iTunes. I truly appreciate it, and I just ask that you keep on leaving reviews, keep on rating it, keep on telling people about the show, and just helping me live my life and just live my dream. And so I wanted to start this episode off with kind of what did 2018 teach me. And if you follow me on social media, whether it's my personal Twitter account or the podcast Twitter account, you know that I run a blog. And it's available at kwhocreates.wixsite.com/Lotus. And so the K is KAE, whocreates.wixsite.com/Lotus. And so, I wanted to pull two things from my latest blog post, which talks about what 2018 has taught me. And it was a very hard year. It was very rough, a lot of struggles, a lot of strife, a lot of stress. And I was trying to figure out, okay, with some of these situations, what is God trying to tell me, And so I realized that 2018 taught me so much in terms of what I don't want. What I don't want in a friend, in a man, in a job, in a neighborhood, in a city, like residential environments in general. It just taught me so much. And even about work culture, what I want and the people I'm around. Just so many different things that taught me about what I don't want. And so I've always been trying to figure out and been focused on what makes me happy. But how can I know what makes me happy if I don't know what I truly dislike and what I truly hate? And so 2018 has been helping me formulate what exactly I don't like. And so my therapist asked me once, what do you need? And I blanked. I was silent. I had no answer. And so that's another purpose of this year. Now I'm able to formulate what I need for myself and also what I need from others. And I'm also beginning to formulate what makes me happy. And so I kind of maybe challenge some of you to think about what do you need, and not just from others, but from yourself. What do you dislike? What do you not want in a friend, in a man, and not just those social relationships, but in terms of what do you want in a job? What is it in terms of what it offers you as a structure overall, and in terms of a work culture and work environment? What do you want in a city that you live in, or what do you want in a neighborhood that you live in? It's just so many different things that we don't really think about like that, but you need to in order to progress, And another big lesson that I learned was to stop moving without God, period. The Bible says that God orders your steps, and that's true. Jumping into relationships or partnerships that aren't ordained by God, they're destined to fail. And if you move in opposition to what his plan is, you'll be left miserable. And again, that applies to even your job and career choices. If you're moving and making these moves for reasons that are not godly and things that are not ordained by God, you will be miserable. Like, I got a job and it paid me more and I'm able to do things, but I literally broke down crying on the way to work. And I said, the money means nothing if I'm not happy. So it's very important to make sure that you're moving in the steps and you're aligned with God so that you won't be miserable, making sure that you're making the right steps, God speaks to you in some way, to illustrate your next move. He speaks to you himself or herself, whichever gender you believe, through other people and through situations. So just pray for discernment. And to hear what he's saying, you have to practice a sort of stillness and self-awareness so that you can be allowed to hear it. So also, there's two more, but I'm not going to go into those. That's why you need to read my blog post. But also later on in the show, we are going to have an interview. And again, I want this to be a very positive episode. So we're going to talk about prosperity and blessings and financial sensibility. And what better way to talk about all that than to talk about careers and jobs? And to help everyone on their path and their journey, I thought that it would be great to get some career advice from different things, from how to do with interviews and resumes and cover letters. So our guest later will be speaking on that. All right, we'll take a break and then we'll be back. Hey everyone, we're back. So on the show, I typically address social issues and the plights community of colors face, but I wanted to shift gears with this episode by discussing helpful tips related to a job search. And today I'm joined by Kyle Poe, a senior career consultant. Hi Kyle, how are you?
Hey, how are you, Michelle?
I am doing good. I'm doing good. We're about to head into the new year, so, All right, so jumping in, picking a career can be a hard decision, and many feel like they must choose between passion and financial sensibility. Is there a middle ground? Like, what type of advice would you have to those who are trying to figure out which career is right for them?
All right. So one of the things that we assist students with doing is providing them with a lot of different resources to assist with this difficult decision of choosing or having to choose a career, especially when it comes to their passion versus financial sensibility, or this is what I want to do versus well, I make a lot doing this. So which one can I choose?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times those positions that are high paying, they're time consuming, they look good on paper. Honestly, students find that this is not a good fit, but they don't find out until down the road,
Mm-hmm.
6 months to a year, and there's a way, not a foolproof, but there's a supplement that we provide to help students kind of gauge what workspace environment is conducive to them based
Mm-hmm.
on their values, based on their interest. They can do this before they actually start job searching. And that resource is ONET Interest Inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can go to Google and type in onet.com,
Mm-hmm.
and the survey allows you to take it for free. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't even have to be a UGA student. You don't have to subscribe to any kind of membership. ONET Interest Inventory, and that's a really great resource for also drafting your resume and cover letter as well. But yeah, that's one thing that, and what it does is it basically, once you answer the survey, it
Mm-hmm.
will give you 6 different zones. So those zones are just different fields, and it will rank the top positions in that field. So if it's like mechanical positions, technical positions, positions where you're working in health, or positions where you're working in business, ranking those positions from most interesting to least interesting based off of the way you responded.
So, when it comes to cover letters, what are the top 3 or 5 tips that you would give for writing a cover letter?
Oh man. Okay. So with resumes and cover letters, because we're going to talk about both.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give an overview. Of the purpose of both of them. So I'll start with the cover letter first because we are talking about the cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
Cover letter is to, for the most part, go in more depth about what it is that is included in your resume. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You need both components. So let's just say that resume and cover letter are north, south, east, west, right, left. They catch the mustard. They complement each other in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But they serve 2 very different purposes. Now, the purpose of a resume is to get you an interview. That's
Mm-hmm.
all.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing more, nothing less. A resume cannot get you the job. The resume is to get you to that next step, which is an interview. The
Mm-hmm.
cover letter supplements that. We'll go into more detail about the resume, but for the cover letter, for the most part, I would say that top 3 tips / advice is to consider the employer's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why you want to do this just because thinking about just the purpose of a cover letter and all the time that has to go into it, you really want to be intentional about what it is that you're including within it.
Mm-hmm.
So you always want to consider the employer's perspective with them. So looking at the job description,
Mm-hmm.
looking at everything, making sure that you read the sentence and tailor it specifically to that job, making sure that you're making sure that you have another set of eyes on it. Just consider the employer's perspective. Another tip I would have is with considering the employer's perspective, is try to keep it between 3 to 4 paragraphs.
Mm-hmm.
The employer is probably looking at 2 dozen other cover letters and resumes. And so you want to keep it short and concise and to the point. So 3 to 4 paragraphs, it should be no more than that. So with that, also, you want to keep it 1 page.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know there's some debate about resumes being 1 page or more than one page, and we'll get into that. But a cover letter, you want to keep it to one page. Very strict. It only needs to be one page. There's not much to talk about, and I'll give a brief synopsis of what it is that you should include in it. But it should only really be one page. It only has to be. And again, the last tip is complement or supplement the resume. So everything that you have included in your resume, it should be complemented in more depth throughout your cover letter. So the things that should be included, the first paragraph should address, for the most part, what it is you're applying for, who you are, what it is that you are applying for, how you found out about the role, and what skills, experiences that you have had that directly relate to this position. That should be your first paragraph. Now, those skills, experiences, etc., they should kind of coincide with the job description. In that second paragraph, you're going to go in more depth about those skills or experiences that will provide some benefit to why you feel like you are qualified for that role. That's that second or third paragraph, and on how you write it up. And then that last paragraph is pretty much just closing.
And so just kind of thinking about what you were saying with the cover letter, I wanted to ask, in one of the paragraphs, do you particularly advise that maybe the writers speak to why they want the position, like what stands out to them about the position, what draws their passion to it? Do you recommend that in the cover letter?
Right, yes. So like I was saying prior, the first paragraph, you're going to address those things, and that can literally just be one thing. The thing about cover letter is it's very easy to embed some small things in there just because it's supposed to be short and concise. But yes, it is very customary to add, why you're applying for this position, or even what the position that you're applying for is titled. So my name is Kyle Poe, and I am applying for the senior career consultant position here at the University of Georgia. The reason I was drawn to this position is because it works with students. You are able to, so on and so forth, something like that. But yeah, it's fine to embed that within there.
And how long?
That would probably go. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I would, looking at the flow of it, I think, and it doesn't vary. I would say that you would need to put that within the first paragraph.
Okay. And so do you recommend, like, how many sentences should it be? Or, like, is it a one sentence thing, or maybe up to, like, a certain level, like, amount, or?
Yeah, so are you talking about by paragraph? How many sentences per paragraph?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense of, like, talking about what draws them to the position. Should it just be, like, 2 sentences explaining it? Or I just want to make sure we keep it, like, concise, as you said. And I just wanted to get a little bit of feel for it.
Yeah, so what I typically tell students, you can do this, anybody can do this. They can do this with an entire cover letter. Just right? And then it's easy to scale back those sentences that you don't need. But what you're looking for when it comes to that instance in particular, that at the max needs to be two sentences.
Okay.
It doesn't take that much for you to explain why you are applying for what you are applying for.
Okay, thank you.
And what drew you to that position.
Yeah. Okay. And so then, still kind of speaking to cover letters, what are the top 3 mistakes people make when they're writing their cover letter?
Yes. So kind of, I have a few of them. Some complement the tips, so they kind of coincide in that way. They're too long. You would be surprised how many people that we as a career center have interviewed that are in the field of career services and have had cover letters and resumes for that matter that are just too long. We just don't. With the work that we do, and this is why you always consider the employer's perspective, we don't have that much time to read a 4-page, a 2-page cover letter at that. 1 page maximum. That's going to draw the reader's attention, and that's being considerate of their time as well. So it's too long. Underestimating its importance would be another mistake. So what I mean by that is a lot of times I think because career is such a gray area, you don't often get to talk about the purpose of a resume, the purpose of a cover letter, and you're just thinking that you're creating it just to fulfill and check off a box. When it's not that, you are actually like people read those. people actually read. People will skim through the resume, yeah, sure, but they will actually go back and look at it. Now, the cover letter is the thing that you really don't. You want it to be not only short, concise, but you also want it to be not have any kind of like grammar issues or broken sentences, or you want it to be very clean.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very, very important. And why I say it is important is if the resume does not, for the most part, align with the position that you are applying for. So if it's not a perfect match, if it doesn't communicate to that employer or the reader, yes, we can interview them, and then they're going to look at that cover letter. And in the cover letter, that's your opportunity to expound a little bit more or in more detail about your experiences and how they relate to the position. And so that's why it's important. You can really turn a resume that is kind of like, okay, I'm reaching to apply for this position and hoping that I get an interview. You can turn that into an interview based on the cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
So just don't underestimate the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the last thing is misinformation about what to include. And so you don't need to include anything about your personal life. We talked about what it is that you should include. Anything that would go into your personal life, you don't necessarily have to do that. There are some parallels between a cover letter and a statement of purpose. Yes, you can actually look at your statement of purpose and kind of condense it down a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and it can pretty much go for a cover letter because it has some valuable things in it. But you, for the most part, don't have to talk about how you came to choose the major, your personal background story, what your major means to you. You don't have to go into that kind of detail. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay. And then kind of shifting gears to resumes, could you please give the listeners your top 3 to 5 tips or advice for creating a resume?
Yes. So yeah, we talked about again, resumes and cover letters, and more so
Mm-hmm.
cover letters. But resumes is again purpose to get you that interview.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them are, but more so you want to put more emphasis on the resume, just because that's the very first thing that the employer is going to look at. So the top 3 things, again, this doesn't count, but consider the employer's perspective. Consider, how long they would have to be looking at this. Can they read this? Is it legible? Does it make sense? What you're writing throughout the bullet points. You should just try to consider their perspective in each section that you're writing. 2 pages maximum. All right. So, like I was saying earlier, I know that there is a lot of debate on whether or not it should be, or whether it can be over 1 page. So I'll pose the question: whether or not you went to college, can you put a certain amount of experience on just 1 page? It's hard. It's very difficult to do that. And so I think that realistically, there is room to give more than 1 page. But I think we tell, as career practitioners, we tell students to provide 1 page just so that they have something starting out. That's just the standard. But it can be a maximum of 2 pages. Anything over that, you want to stay away from. The next to strong objective verbs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
one thing you can do is you can either Google or you can look up Bloom's taxonomy to find strong action verbs. And the reason we use strong action verbs is to describe what it is that you did throughout the position. So whether that was communicated, planned, executed, and there are different fields for the different actions that you did. But for the most part, you want to use strong action verbs to start off the beginning of each bullet point.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's actually a formula that goes with the strong action verb. And listeners, you can all write this down and rewind it if you can. action verb plus the tasks plus the purpose / or outcome, and that's the bullet point for the most part. But you want to include this strong action verb just because that's just resume standard. That's what you want to do. That's all right. Whenever you submit your resume to a job website, like for instance LinkedIn or Indeed or ZipRecruiter, BuzzFile.com, and you're like a third party website that you're applying to different jobs for, they are, for the most part, they're created in a way to where an employer can have a setting to pull a resume based on certain things, and they pull on things like strong action verbs or the numerical value that's included within your resume, or just different headers using field jargon. So yes, that's one reason to include strong action verbs. Yeah, I already gave you the formula. So yeah, those are the tips. Now, some mistakes that kind of happen with resumes is one, not tailoring it to the position or the job description. And this part is very important. Oftentimes, students will come in and just feel like they can have one resume for every job, and that's not necessarily the case. I think you can get by with doing that for a lot of different shadowing opportunities or grad programs or internships even. But for full-time jobs, you have to tailor your resume. You have to look at the job description and highlight those different experiences that they're requiring of the successful candidate, and matching it up with things that you have done or things that you have done similarly in your experiences, so your current position. So you have to tailor your resume. There are different ways you can do that. You can do that through just formatting, so you can put the experiences that are the most relevant to the experiences that are least relevant. You can do that throughout any or every individual bullet point. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that. I think that while there's no one way, there's one way that works for you. And if you like how it looks format-wise, and if it flows, if it makes sense to you, I would advise to have someone look over it, just so that it makes sense to them as well. Template, don't use it. Blank period. Just don't use a template. It honestly makes more sense, and it saves a little bit more time to just start from scratch. And honestly, if you have uploaded your information on LinkedIn, you can really just copy it from there and then start, from scratch, quote unquote, start from scratch. I mean, the stuff is already there. So, but yes, please just try to stay away from templates, please. And then just a lack of consistency throughout the resume. And this speaks more to the formatting. So, you want it to be clean and you want it to be unique, however. And I think that's one of the reasons why I put this in here, because a lot of students will want it to be so unique that it's just so many different types and styles of bullet points and formats and colors. And you just want to have all these different things in there, but you can actually throw off the readers by having so many different colors, so many different fonts. Just, the point blank, you just want to be consistent throughout. And some people are nitpicky, so if I have 3 or 4 bullet points, and for this position, I'll have 3 or 4 bullet points for the next position. That's not necessarily what I mean. What I mean is more so the formatting. So the font, the italicization, the capitalization. Just make sure that it's consistent throughout, from the header and to footer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And so we've been speaking about cover letters and resumes being a key component to landing an interview. And so what is the best way to prepare for an interview? Is there any advice you would like to give for conducting oneself prior to and during?
Sure. So interviews are fun, or at least they should be fun. And the reason I say they should be fun is because if you have done all the research that you should be doing, which is basically writing your resume and cover letter, I mean, you do it just not directly. If you're doing some of the research, you should feel a little bit confident because you know what the position is about, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, that is the number one reason, and this is what we're going to talk about. It's kind of it's a mistake, and it's a best way to prepare. The mistake is the lack of research.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is not necessarily like researching, what this person does in their role. You don't have to know that. What the lack of research is knowing everything about the position itself, or what the position remotely does.
Mm-hmm.
That is, 90% of the reason why students or first-time or people who are applying for jobs for the first time in their lives, first-time graduates, that's the number one reason why they don't get the job, is because they just weren't, they didn't do enough research for the position.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be one of the things that I would make a priority. So let's just say that you see a position on LinkedIn and it was posted 2 or 3 days ago. One of the things that I would do is, yes, while I'm going to look at that LinkedIn page, right, I'm also going to visit the website. I'm going to visit the website to look at that position description, but I'm also going to look at the position of the company, right? I'm going to look at what it is they do, who they serve, what was their total revenue if they had that for the year. I'm going to look at some news articles about this organization. I'm going to also look at their staff and how they're organized, right? Because I just want to know where my position lies or who I would directly report to. Those kinds of things are just, while every interview is different, what I found in student affairs, that is going to prepare you the most for that next position, is actually looking at every aspect of this company or organization. I think a resource, and this is, I don't know that this is free for everyone, but salary.com and Glassdoor are really, really, really good, great resources for looking at how interviews have gone, or more so Glassdoor. They have, the way it works is they have reviews about interviews, like what people have asked in an interview, and just the overall vibe of an interview. So that's one way to prepare, is just doing the actual research. And like I said, you get that for the most part from looking by creating and crafting your resume and cover letter, but it's also a step further as to looking at this company website, asking friends, looking at their social media, just doing stuff like that, like little nuances. And if you familiarize yourself with that for approximately a week or so, then you should know enough. It's not that very labor intensive. So, yeah, that's one thing. I think the next thing is, and this is probably the number one tip I can say to prepare for an interview, is informational interview. So in that time where you are just conducting research, right, one thing that you could do is potentially look at who or call, try to find out who it is that is on either the hiring committee or HR, so that you can conduct an interview, so you can ask some questions about the position. So if there's something within the job description or concerns that you have about the company, or just things that just kind of like, I want to ask somebody about that. I want to talk to somebody a little bit more about that and get a deeper understanding as to what that means. That's time. Those are the kinds of questions that you would want to ask in an informational interview. Now, that is one purpose of the informational interview, but what it also does is it helps you to stand out. Right? So whenever you're applying for the position, like I said back when we were talking about resumes and cover letters, you have competition. Let's just put it out there. You have competition, and when it comes down to narrowing down, the potential candidates, it comes down to who stood out the most. And so people are going to remember when you called and you asked about what was the culture of the company, or what is the leadership model look like, just because they had it on the website. How do they value diversity and inclusion? Those are some sample questions that you all can ask, but people are going to remember those things just because they don't necessarily expect you to understand how the office works. And so for you to intuitively have those questions at hand, you're being punctual by calling, you're going to stand out. So informational interviews are the way to go. And also, people aren't doing them.
Mm-hmm.
Students, it's one thing for students to come in not knowing what they are. True, sure, fair. I'll give you that. But when I'm talking to colleagues, it's just a thing that's not happening. Now, granted, at this point, in your career, once you're like 2 to 3 years, you're going to look at positions a little bit differently. Your research, it's going to be different. It's going to be a little bit more about networking. But for the most part, informational interviews are the way to go. And so I guess the last thing to do, and this is a little bit this is on the other end of it,
mm-hmm.
This is once you have had the interview, but it still kind of falls into like the preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I brought this up is because it's something that's not really thought about,
mm-hmm.
but following up,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's something that's very simple, and it lets the employers and the interviewers know that you have taken the time to consider and appreciate them for interviewing you, right? And so that can be something as simple as an email or a letter or a card. Whatever fits your fancy, that's up to you. Me personally, I think it depends on the amount of time that you have. But one thing which is why I put it in preparation, you can actually go ahead and prep those emails prior to the interview,
mm-hmm.
and then just send them off, as soon as you leave the interview. It's simple. Thank you for your time interviewing me for the position. I was so glad that we were able to talk about the different office initiatives as they pertain to diversity and inclusion. I look forward to hearing from you further down the road as the interview process or the application process continues. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Something as simple as that
mm-hmm.
can be said or done, and it just leaves an impression of professionalism with the interviewer.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
All right.
I can speak a little bit more to mistakes. I think one thing that students will do is or not do is prepare. And what I mean by prepare is practice.
Mm-hmm.
So there are typical interview questions all over the internet. And I'll give you one way to answer a question just because it's so much of a gray area. But
mm-hmm.
There are sample questions all over the internet, but it's more so familiarizing yourself with those questions. They can only ask so many questions.
Mm-hmm.
You have your traditional questions, you have your behavioral questions, and then you have yours kind of like your situation or your zinger type questions, like trick questions.
Mm-hmm.
The traditional questions are to get to know you. They're the easiest and the simplest to learn and understand because you're talking about yourself. You just don't know that you're talking about yourself. You don't know how to talk about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The behavioral questions are easy to identify in an interview is because they often start with, tell me about a time when, right?
Yeah.
They want to assess what you would do or what you have done in a particular situation and how it correlates with that position and how it operates. So tell me about a time when you have dealt with a difficult customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. The way you want to answer that is using the STAR method. So situation is the S, task, action, and then result.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much how you answer those behavioral questions or those tell me about the time when. And then those zinger questions or those trick questions that people may or may not get. All right. And then those zinger questions are, for the most part, just to assess how you conceptualize information. I think, one of the students asked me, well, how would I go about answering this? And the answer to that is just thinking out loud, right? So I think, what was the question? So one of the questions I think that we have in our career guide is, if how many pennies would it take to stack to match the Empire State Building or something like that, something weird like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the purpose of that is just to see how you think and how you problem solve and how you are able to critically think. That's all that is purpose for. There's no need to feel apprehensive about that one or feel scared at all with those types of questions. But overall, an interview should just be a conversation. And like I said in the beginning, it's fun because at this point you should know, and if you don't feel comfortable with interviewing for this position, that should tell you one thing: either you're not prepared, or maybe this isn't the organization for you if you don't feel comfortable. But for the most part, you should feel comfortable. You should feel confident going into the interview because you've done the research prior to. You should not feel. I mean, yes, there's a level of nervousness that you have, but I don't think any interviewer's aim should be to intimidate. At least not with like regular jobs, like federal jobs. I can't speak on, but
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, guys, I want to thank Kyle so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. And I hope that you all found this very valuable and very knowledgeable because I know I did. So, again, Kyle, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, no problem. No problem.
All right. So, we'll take a quick break and then we'll be right back. Hey y'all, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. And so I want to do a Black Excellence moment, and that goes to Miss Olympia Ohanian, Serena and Alexis's daughter. So she was watching her mom and Venus play each other, and she was just being adorable and clapping, and you could actually see like she was actually paying attention to the back and forth tennis action. So maybe another little Venus Serena on the way with her. You never know. And so I wanted to also do a throwback song, and this is a really, really throwback song. It is Always and Forever by Heatwave. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in. I hope this was a great episode. I enjoy it, and Happy New Year. Bye.